right, ladies and gentlemen, we'll get underway in just about 5 minutes.
Test 1, 2, 3, 4. Test 1, 2, 3, 4. We will be starting in about 5 minutes, according to John. I'm just checking out the Facebook Live. We're ready to go.
Turn it. Jeff Ramaj to the stage, please. Jeff Ramaj. All right, everyone. Thank you. Thank you for coming. It is 6 o'clock, and we're going to get going. We are going to have our invocation by our Vice Chairman, Tamara Kent. Followed by our Pledge of Allegiance by Senator Stacey Jones.
Dear Lord, guide our words and actions in this meeting. May our discussions be productive, our decisions wise, and our interactions filled with respect and understanding. Bless us with unity and clarity as we work towards our common goals. Amen.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, everyone. Thank you so much. I want to welcome you all here. I want to welcome all of our guests. I want to welcome everyone that is here with us, online. Thank you to Bruce Pivick and YO4 News. I will introduce our moderator in just a second. I want to thank all of the candidates for participating. This is night one. We have 2 nights. We have 8 contested races, so we have 8 debates. There's a schedule if you want to know who we have up tonight is Senate District 12, John Kolb and Jeff Ramaj. Senate District 14, Albert Sommers, Laura Pearson, and Bill Winney. House District 17, J.T. Larson and Terry Ellison. And House District 18, Scott Heiner and Tom Crank. So everyone's been given the rules and procedures, and our moderator, the awesome Johnny Kay, will give an explanation of the rules. We just thank everyone for your attendance, everyone for understanding the importance, and everyone's help here tonight. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm glad that you're not suffering from COVID this year. See, Island Richards is joining us as well. Glad he's not suffering. Let me cover a couple notes if I could. I was visiting with Bruce earlier today, and I said, so Bruce, who do we have running the technical side of the house? He says, Johnny, I'm all they got. Bruce, you have truly forgotten more about electronics and technical application than I'll ever know. So I want to thank my friend Bruce Pivick from YO Radio and Infinity Power and Controls, and also streaming this once again on Facebook with YO4 News. Also, gluttons for punishment, our timekeepers this evening. Tammy Valdez, thank you for being here. And I can only say this because I think I'm out of arm's reach. Rob Zotti, the Father Time. Only tease my friends, Robin. We appreciate you being here. So let me quickly go over some of the rules and such. Each candidate will have 2 minutes, not to exceed 2 minutes, for an opening statement. Then each candidate will be asked the same questions. We will be varying that from race to race. Candidates will alternate who answers the question first. Candidates will have up to, but not to exceed, 90 seconds to answer each question presented by myself. The candidate who answered the question first will receive up to 30 seconds for rebuttal after the second candidate answers a question. To aid candidates in managing the response times, the committee once again, off to my right as we mentioned, will be implementing time paddles. Rob, if you could help me out here. Visual aid, the green paddle will be displayed when 30 seconds remain. Yellow paddle will be displayed when 10 seconds remain. The red panel will be displayed when the time expires. If a candidate continues speaking after their time expires, the microphone will be turned off. The microphone rule will also be in effect for rebuttals and opening and closing statements, so candidates plan accordingly. We may be asking follow-up questions at any point. In that case, each candidate will receive 30 seconds to answer the follow-up question in the same order of the original question with no additional rebuttals. And as far as closing statements are concerned, with approximately 5 minutes left of scheduled time, the candidates will be asked to make their closing statements. Each candidate will receive up to, but not to exceed, 2 minutes for the closing statements. All right, well, let's begin. A couple of the general parameters that we came up with tonight. If there is an incumbent, They will be seated closest to me, and then as far as the opening questions are concerned, it's rotating from race to race. So just by happenstance, we'll begin with question number 1, and the challenger, Jeff Ramaj. Good evening, Jeff.
Good evening. Is this the opening statement?
I apologize. Opening statement, thank you for correcting me, Senator Kolb. Senator Kolb, being the incumbent, if you would begin with your opening statement, please.
Thank you, Johnny. I want to express my gratitude to everyone who made this debate possible and who gave me this opportunity to speak to you directly. As your Wyoming State Senator, I am John Kolb, representing District 12. I'm 67 years old. I'm proud to be married to my wife, Elvira. Together we have 4 children and are blessed with 5 grandchildren. I attended Embry-Riddle Aeronautical University with an aeronautical engineering major. I am a successful small business owner for over 40 years. I hold a Wyoming Master Electrician's license for 41 years, a CDL, and over 5 specialty licenses. My expertise lies in system analysis. I enjoy astrophotography, brewing beer, teaching taekwondo. I have a 4th degree black belt. We explore Sweetwater County in our side-by-side, hunting and fishing. And if I had any more hobbies, my wife just might disown me. God bless her. As a dedicated Republican for over 45 years, I have served in various political roles. I have been a Republican committee man for over 14 years, elected as a Sweetwater County Commissioner for 8 years, and made history as your first Republican senator for District 12 in 2020. I have served on Senate Judiciary Committee, Chair of the Journals Committee, Transportation and Military Affairs Committee, Agriculture Committee, Select Water Committee, State Shooting Sports Task Force, and Chairman of the Select Federal Natural Resource Management Committee, to name a few. Effective leadership is more than completing a questionnaire. It's hard work. It's tolerance for other elected officials' points of view, all in balance with my unwavering dedication to core conservative values to move and support good, just, and effective law. Thank you.
Senator Kolb, and with that, let's hear an opening statement from the challenger for Senate District 12, Jeff Ramaj.
I am Jeff Ramaj, and I am a constitutional conservative. I have lived in Rock Springs since 1978 with a brief 3.5 years in the Navy. I want to go a little bit different rather than talk about myself. And I want to talk about some of our Congress people, not just in the state, but nationally. They tend to be egotistical, and behind every egotistical man is a petulant, scared little boy. And the reason being is they're unsure of themselves. We are living in a time when the very people we hire to serve us lie to us. The very people charged with protecting our way of life are wrecking it. Everything they do is smoke and mirrors, lies and deceit, and this needs to stop. Let us expose those who have become completely detached from reality due to political brainwashing. Framing one's opposition into an enemy is a radical strategy from the 60s. It turns actual problem solving into an ego game of winning and losing through wordplay. Consider problem solving to any issue and the truth will present itself. In a difficult concept, facts. Seek truth, avoid their version of truth. We are walking right next to the edge of the abyss in this country. Our constitutional republic is incrementally being turned into a democracy, a socialist nightmare, or a Marxist oligarchy. A republic is bottom-up governance, while a democracy is top-down governance. Some legislators believe they are elected because of their superior intelligence, and they truly believe they know what's best for you, and that you could not possibly understand how government works or what you really need. Power granted to the government in the Constitution by the people does not mean if it is not in the Constitution, they can do it. It means if it is not in the Constitution, it is reserved to the people. No absolute arbitrary power. At what point did
Jeff, yeah. Thank you for the opening statement, and that's a good example of how the timing works this evening. Let's jump right in with a question, shall we? And let me pose the first question to you, Jeff. And if I may, let's just address the elephant in the room. Jeff, is your opponent a rhino? If so, how or why?
I believe he is a conservative, but I don't believe he's a constitutional conservative. And I do not believe that he votes in the best interest of the people.
Very good. Let me pose the same question to Senator John Kolb. There's been a lot of conjecture, particularly in this race, about rhinos. Are you a rhino?
Well, at 89% rated on 5 rating sites as a conservative with 6,000 votes behind me, I don't think so. I think anybody can talk whatever they want to say. It's a political world. But anybody who doesn't understand the Wyoming State Constitution is not a conservative anything. They don't understand the Constitution of the state of Wyoming, which we are in fact subservient to the federal government to powers that they have claimed. So there's a limit to what we can do, and there is a difference between state and federal actions. So it is a bit crazy to start coming across with those kind of points of view. It's just not supported. I've always listened to people and continue to listen to people. I find it kind of odd that somebody would challenge that kind of statement, but I guess, like I say, it's politics. But no, I am a conservative. I vote conservatively. I was the most conservative person on the Board of County Commissioners for over 8 years. I have a conservative track record, not just some yammerings about what I say I'm going to do. I've done it, and I've stood the test, and I'm proud of that, and that's what I like to do. Thank you.
Thank you, John. And Jeff, 30 seconds in rebuttal if you so choose.
Yes. On the tax initiative, my opponent threatened that if that tax initiative went through, he would put in an income tax. This is not something a conservative or someone who listens to the people would do.
Thank you. And I know you didn't see my notes, Jeff, but let's continue traveling down that path. Next question will go to Senator Kolb. And regarding taxes, Senator, property tax reform is a critical issue for many voters. How do you plan to approach property tax reform if elected, or in this case reelected? And are there any specific changes or policies you believe are necessary to make property taxes more equitable and manageable for homeowners and businesses in our district?
Well, we've done a lot with property tax. Thanks for the question. We have numerous programs that are, frankly, sustainable. That is coming. But what really we have in front of us is a ballot initiative for the upcoming election that's going to allow us to create a separate property tax class. That's really where the long-term fix is, because we need flexibility. The issue is that you can't just stop, say, at a 50% tax initiative. The funding, the back funding, has to be taken care of by the state for the schools, and then the local governments that fund, police, fire, ambulance, whatever be the case, they won't have the money. So I think this has to be done carefully and with consideration. Now for the story I heard from my opponent over here about me saying there was going to be an income tax. I hate to say this, but Jeff and the truth aren't close friends. And that's an utter, absolute, categorical lie, much like the same about him booting rhinos out. So that is not true. And I'm not going to just stand here and listen to some attacks that are not based on a truthful statement by me. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator. And the same question back to Jeff from my property tax reform is a critical issue for many voters. How do you plan to approach property tax reform if elected? And are there specific changes or policies you believe are necessary to make property taxes more equitable and manageable for homeowners and businesses in our district?
Yeah, in order for the people to be able to plan and know where their finances are, we need to freeze the property tax rate on their homes at the time that they purchase their homes, and it won't be going up according to values and whose neighbor sold their house for more money or above market price, which raises your property taxes. I believe this is unfair to the people, and I believe it's insane in a time of inflation that we're raising taxes all the way around. I understand the government needs money to operate, but it's out of reach for most people, and I'm hearing from my constituents that it's gotten egregious. And as far as the statement on the income tax, it was said in 2 or 3 different public meetings.
Very good. Now let's continue further on down the road. Let me get back to Senator Kolb. You kind of alluded to some of these issues, but the follow-up regarding property tax reform, Senator, how would you make local governments whole if they had lost half of their residential property tax revenue?
As per the local government issue, that's going to have to be dealt with locally. I think every county is a little bit different. Sweetwater, is blessed with having a huge industrial base. It won't be nice or easy, but they could probably figure out a way around it for back funding. But honestly, if it comes from the state of Wyoming and the legislative body decides to cut that, and it's on us. So I think we have a certain responsibility for back funding. We can't expect the local communities to bear a choice that we made at the state level, and then have ramifications of what they do. I think that's part of the problem with this property tax reform. As it comes to acquisition-based property tax, that is a catastrophic failure. California's done it. It's a Democratic strategy that's failed over there, and I will not support Democratic ideas. And the continued lies that I've just heard that I talk about imposing a tax is just that. It's a lie. And I don't know what else to say about it, and I'll leave it there. But once again, it's not accurate.
Thank you, Senator. And again, a follow-up question, let me pose it to Jeff Ramaj. How would you make local governments whole if they lost half the residential property tax revenue?
We have our mineral tax, but right now our minerals-based economy is being destroyed by alternative energy and zero carbon emissions policies, and those need to be stopped. We need to get rid of the windmills and the solar panels and the carbon capture, and reopen our minerals-based industry. That's where our strong suit is. Put our people back to work, and this brings in more money for the counties.
All right, thank you, Jeff. And Senator Kolb, 30 seconds for rebuttal if you so choose.
Well, I am not a fan of wind generation or any other crackpot idea the federal government's come up with for green energy that's subsidized by the federal government that costs us all money with inflation. I'd be clear about it. I don't like any of it. However, there are necessary evils out there. To keep the power plant open, you had to deal with the federal government. And if that was a $10 million expenditure to fight federal regulation, I think it was necessary. That is over I guess I'm done.
All right. Jeff, let me get back to you, if I may. The next question, this will begin with yourself. Regarding spending and efficiency, what strategies would you employ to ensure state funds are spent efficiently and effectively? And are there specific programs or departments where you believe there is a significant waste or inefficiency?
Well, we added 52 government positions to the state government, and I realized that was at some point necessary through the judiciary, but I believe we need cities.
Very good. And the same question, let me pose it to Senator Kolb. What strategies would you employ to ensure state funds are spent efficiently and effectively? And are there specific programs or departments where you believe there is significant waste or inefficiency?
Yeah, government's main job seems like it's to grow. And I think that people have to have proper oversight, and that's a must. And that takes knowledge and experience on just what they're trying to do with government services. The 52 people that were mentioned, well, that was a veto by the governor. Once again, the inability to read what had happened during the session is showing up here. 52 people was a governor veto, not voted for by the House or Senate. The other part of it was a number less than 50, 30 odd, some odd, and they were for regulatory permit issuing. So DEQ, we are actually strangling ourselves by not issuing permits in a timely manner. Those people were put in there to issue permits more quickly, to get revenue more quickly in the state of Wyoming. So thank you, Johnny.
All right. Thank you, Senator. And if you so choose, Jeff, 30 seconds in rebuttal.
Yes. My opponent voted in favor of adding 52 government positions, even though it was vetoed by the governor. And as far as the permitting, if we trim up some of the regulations, like I said, a reduction in regulations, and trim out all the unnecessary regulations, and our companies, our industry that implements these things needs to have very specific and straightforward regulations that don't change all.
All right. Thank you, Jeff. Let's move right along, and the next topic will begin with Senator Kolb. The topic is mental health. Senator, what measures would you implement to improve access to mental health services for residents of Sweetwater County?
Well, thank you, Johnny. First, this is a genuine issue. That's a growing problem. The state is doing what it can, as we have no input as per the courts and medical professionals. First, this needs to have local control, and that's because every locality is unique, and they know their situation with services. Some counties don't have anything, and some do. Some have others. I think it's a lot like law enforcement. It has to be funded to a certain level, and it has to be reasonable and effective. I think it's a pretty tough question. I appreciate the question. But more importantly, I want to circle back to this 52 story you just heard. That 52 was a veto by the governor to raise it to 52, not to decrease it to some other number. Once again, the inability to read the budget, which is not easy, is showing through here. That's an inaccurate statement, and it can be backed up by facts. Thank you, Johnny.
Thank you, Senator. And again, let me pose the same question to Jeff Ramaj. Jeff, what measures would you implement to improve access to mental health services for residents of Sweetwater County?
We need to be aware of people's mental state, but we need to go back to the root cause of the problem. Our schools are teaching transgenderism and gender fusion within the kids is circulating through the schools. We have older folks who have lost their ranches, their lifelong ranches, because they can't afford to pay the taxes, and different environmental issues have caused problems there as well. So I think that we need to go back to the root cause and start solving it there and provide the mental health for the people that need it now.
Very good. Thank you, Jeff. And Senator Kolb, 30-second rebuttal.
Well, just to be clear, nobody in Sweetwater County has lost a ranch. Okay, I did a check on this to make sure to see how the property tax situation was. So that's in it. I don't know where that is, but it's not here. Not really a rebuttal. I think mental health is really an unanswerable question because of other folks are making decisions that we have no control over. If we were to spend the entire state's budget on mental health, which threw me off, I'll leave it at that. It's a very expensive proposition that we have to support, and we do support it.
Thank you. Let's move right along. I'll pose the next question to Jeff Ramaj. And let me take a moment to remind everybody there was a great team that was assembled that cultivated the questions for both this evening and tomorrow night, obviously above my pay grade. So we appreciate the team that put these questions together. The next 2 minutes availed to Jeff Ramaj. Qualified immunity has been a topic of significant debate, particularly concerning its impact on accountability and public trust in law enforcement. Jeff, what is your stance on qualified immunity? How do you propose balancing the need for police accountability with protecting officers from frivolous lawsuits? Jeff?
I think our law enforcement has an extremely tough job. I did speak with a state patrol officer who was aggravated about the illegals that are driving semi-trucks that have been issued CDL licenses, and they feel powerless to be able to do anything with that. I think there are some cases, and I think it needs to be on a case-by-case basis, because even in law enforcement we have good guys and we have bad guys. That's the way society is wired. So you can't always trust each person to do the right thing every time. And so I think that there needs to be some responsibility put on their supervisors to make that judgment call as to whether they deserve the immunity or not.
Very good. Thank you, Jeff. And same question to Senator Kolb. Qualified immunity has been a topic of significant debate, particularly concerning its impact on accountability and public trust in law enforcement. What is your stance on qualified immunity, and how do you propose balancing the need for police accountability with protecting officers from frivolous lawsuits?
Well, to be clear, I support qualified immunity, unqualified. The issue, what makes it work, is that it relies on the county attorney in many cases, in most cases, to prosecute somebody who's violated what is considered reasonable action by a normal person in a court of law. So we do have that. It's not decided by some upper bureaucrat within the law enforcement group. It's decided by the court system. And anything that goes on that's above what people think is reasonable is violation of the qualified immunity standards. We need qualified immunity. Without qualified immunity, we will not have law enforcement officers. Nobody in their right mind would do that job. Combined, this goes beyond law enforcement. Qualified immunity actually affects people that are government workers for qualified immunity. As long as they're doing something that a reasonable person would consider proper, they're protected. It protects people in their ability to do their job. It's absolutely critical. We cannot lose qualified immunity. If we do, we're going to lose law enforcement and we're going to lose the law. Thank you.
Thank you. Jeff, 30 seconds.
Well, I agree with my opponent that qualified immunity is a good thing, but I disagree with the processes by which it's administered because if an officer is put under investigation and it finds that he did nothing wrong, it can ruin his reputation and cost him his job, even at that level. So I think that there needs to be some very careful consideration as to who makes the judgments.
Thank you. Next line of questions will cover privacy and surveillance. Let me begin with Senator Kolb. John, in the age of increasing digital surveillance, how would you protect the privacy rights of Wyoming residents, and what policies would you support to safeguard against unwarranted government intrusion?
Yeah, thank you, Johnny. We have worked on many, many bills, and with this the increasing level of technology with drones and covert video recording, we have enhanced the penalties for doing that. There's been many instances where it was necessary to increase those penalties to punish the people that were doing things that you would expect privacy. We had bills that wouldn't allow you to fly a drone over a fence where you have, in fact, a reasonable expectation of privacy in your own backyard. So it's going to be an ongoing evolution to keep up with technology, and of course, government's always a little bit behind. But I think it has to be always looked after to guarantee our rights as individuals to do what you'd like to do in the safety of your own home or the privacy of a room you think you have privacy in. So thank you for the question.
Thank you, Senator. Jeff, same question to yourself again. In the age of increasing digital surveillance, how would you protect the privacy rights of Wyoming residents, and what policies would you support to safeguard against unwarranted government intrusion?
Well, I would agree with my opponent on what he stated about the surveillance drones and things like that. When it comes to computers and that smartphone that you have, you just have to be extremely careful on what you do online. Anything online is recorded and monitored by companies and by the government. I do think that we ought to put some prohibition on the government planes that are flying overhead that are scanning for cell phone signals and different things like that. I think that's an invasion of my privacy. They can pick up your internet routers and other electronics in your home.
Very good. Thank you, Jeff. John, 30 seconds.
Yeah, thank you, Johnny. Well, let me just say, I'm not a conspiracy nut. I don't believe in chemtrails. I don't believe that my computer turns on by itself and it erases itself, which was testified to by my opponent in the Sweetwater County Commission meeting. I don't believe in any of that. I do believe, though, we have to be very vigilant. I believe that this is, once I said again, that it's constantly evolving and technology always has to be kept up with. Thank you, Johnny.
Thank you. Moving right along. Next question, we'll begin with Jeff Ramaj, and the topic, Wyoming's geopolitical role. Jeff, given Wyoming's significant contributions to the national energy supply and natural resources, how do you see the state's role in national and global geopolitics? And what policies do you advocate to leverage Wyoming's resources in a way that enhances both state and national interests on the global stage? Jeff?
Well, I'll start by saying that not believing in chemtrails is foolish because it was put out by an executive order and given permission to a group to commence with that. On the geopolitical role, we must set the standard worldwide as a constitutional republic and demonstrate to the world what true freedom and liberty is supposed to look like. We need to stop the indoctrinations. We need to make deals with countries overseas and other states to supply them with our valuable minerals, our natural gas, our oil, and we need to promote the production of these things and doing it in a safe way where we don't pollute the environment.
Thank you, Jeff. And same question, Senator Kolb, once again. Given Wyoming's significant contributions to the national energy supply and natural resources, how do you see the state's role in national and global geopolitics? Further, what policies would you advocate to leverage Wyoming's resources in a way that enhances both state and national interests on the global stage?
Well, every state is a border state. The Senate bill was sent to $2 million of aid to Texas in 24, and also $10 million in 23 to help build the wall. Some of those bills were killed by the House. Moreover, though, the export of coal, CNG, and trona are affected. Wyoming must protect our rights to export. However, chemtrails and EMF stories should be left to the conspiracy nuts. I might add that I have an aeronautical engineering background. It is categorically preposterous to think that you're going to spread a chemical at 30,000 feet and 50 degrees below zero and have any effect on the ground. So I think it is really the world of conspiracy crazies. Thank you.
And Jeff, 30 seconds to you.
We're living in a world right now where conspiracy is becoming conspiracy fact, and I believe my opponent needs to get an education.
Well, moving right along, trying to squeeze in as many good questions as we can, and thank you both. Let's move right along. The topic, education funding, and we'll begin with, I believe, Senator Kolb. What specific measures would you propose to ensure adequate and sustained funding for our public schools? And the follow-on, how would you address current funding shortfalls and prioritize educational resources?
Yeah, thank you, John. We're currently in a lawsuit right now to decide if we're adequately funding schools. But the absolute large issue we face is the funding of K through 12. The projection is in 3 to 4 years, revenues will not keep up with expenditures. At this point, I support splitting the block grants into teachers and administration block grants and combining fragmented school districts to reduce overhead. I will only work with using our current tax structure with no new taxes. Now, where this is important is these stories we're hearing about having this free giveaway for home taxes or massive cuts. We won't be able to keep up with this. I think we need flexibility. The constitutional amendment that's coming up on the ballot is going to give us flexibility to address that when we can. But there is a crisis coming to education for funding, and it's unstoppable, and it has to be addressed, and I look forward to addressing it. Thank you.
Thank you, John. And the same question let me pose to Jeff Ramaj. Jeff, what specific measures would you propose to ensure adequate and sustained funding for our public schools? And how would you address current funding shortfalls and prioritize educational resources?
Well, I believe our schools, if the numbers are correct, we're spending close to $20,000 per student to educate them, while other states are spending around $6,000. So I think we can make some cuts there. I believe that we need to have less administrators and better paid, be able to pay our teachers better, and in so doing we would cut some of the funding, because quite honestly right now I don't feel like I'm getting my money's worth. I mean, I hire young kids to come and work for me, and they can't add and subtract or even write an invoice, and they're 18, 19 years old, so I don't think we're getting our money's worth. We need to look at the school system's efficiency more, and I think we can make the funding by looking at that more closely.
Thank you, Jeff. Senator Kolb, 30 seconds.
It is true that we spend more per student in the state of Wyoming, and I think we could obviously spend less per student in the state of Wyoming, but that's driven by our population size and the challenges we face by having a low amount of children going to school. I think the grants are another huge problem. I would like to have an audit of the grant from cradle to grave to actually figure out, do these grants pay for themselves? Everyone thinks it's free government money, but no one has actually analyzed the actual cost of grants. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator. And that'll about bring to a close this particular debate for this evening. We started with the incumbent, and that will be the format we'll continue through tonight and tomorrow. But we'll let the challenger, in this case Jeff Ramaj, get the final word. So as far as closing statements are concerned, let's begin with Senator Kolb. John?
Oh, I go first again? All right. Thank you, Johnny. I'm the only proven effective conservative candidate, Senate District 12. I have and will continue to vote and be a champion of your personal freedoms, parental rights, school choice, and keeping men out of women's sports and the locker room. I'm also a champion of Second Amendment rights as the only A-rated and endorsed candidate by both the NRA and GOA. I oppose all federal government overreach, such as the Rock Springs Resource Management Plan. I am in favor of reducing unnecessary pork barrel spending in the state budget and improving transparency. I back the blue. Law enforcement is the cornerstone of any civilized society. I support low and sustainable property taxes. I voted for the new and only fully funded Rock Springs High School that my constituents demanded. With over 6,000 votes cast in 4 years, my overall conservative rating crosses 5 sites is 89%. This is a testament to my proven and tested record as a lawmaker, providing you with the security and confidence in my abilities. I have earned a reputation as a well-spoken, thinking, conservative Republican senator. My word is my bond. Sheriff Grossnickel, Mayor Mickelson, County Attorney Aaron Mosby have endorsed me because of my proven, effective conservative leadership. Also, the Wyoming Petroleum Marketers Association and the Wyoming Mining Association, to name a few. Civility in this election is under attack. There is no longer any facts about what is fiction and who can sling the most mud and spreading absolute lies. We are now hunting rhinos, kicking and poaching rhinos. Engaging in this rhetoric is utter grade school nonsense. I believe in debating factual voting records rather than labeling and name-calling. Wyoming is better than that. I'm asking for your vote on August 20th. Your support means a lot to me, and I'm truly grateful for it. Thank you.
Thank you, John. And as Senator Kolb mentioned, he got the first word. Jeff Ramaj will give you the last word. 2 minutes.
Thank you, Johnny. Well, I ask you to judge us less by our words and more by the content of our character. Actions speak louder than words, and how we treat others and conduct our daily lives shows us our true character. We have engaged in a war of words tonight, but you, the voter, must look closer at each one of us and decide which of us will better serve you as your senator in Cheyenne. I know that taxes and food and just about every other thing we purchase is ridiculously high. I know we are being crushed under the weight of government regulations, insurance, high interest, immorality, the threat of war, illegal aliens, and poisonous food, and we are being lied to by our government. So we either ignore it and hide from it, and we hope the nightmare will end, or you stand up and shout, I am not going to take it anymore. Your decision at the polls will determine whether they succeed in destroying Wyoming. We the people reboot Wyoming and take our state government back. Thank you.
Thank you once again, your candidates for Senate District 12, incumbent Senator John Kolb and the challenger Jeff Ramaj. Gentlemen, thank you so much for sharing your thoughts and opinions this evening. All right, welcome back. Let's continue on now with Senate District 14. No particular order. Let me call your attention to our candidates this evening, Albert Sommers, Laura Pearson, and Bill Winney. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for joining us. And let's begin with opening statements, 2 minutes each, I believe. And let me begin with Albert Sommers.
Hello, my name is Albert Sommers, and I'm a Republican candidate for Senate District 14. And first, I would like to thank the Sweetwater County Republican Party for putting on this forum. It's a great opportunity. I have my family are fourth-generation ranchers on both sides of the family in the Green River Valley. I have served Sublette County as its representative for 12 years, and I am the current Speaker of the House in Wyoming. My priorities are jobs, education, protecting Wyoming's water, local control, supporting our core industries of trona, coal, oil and gas, tourism, and ag, and advocating for our heritage of recreation and wildlife. I have the experience and I have built the relationships in Cheyenne and throughout Wyoming to be an effective senator for the people and businesses of Southwest Wyoming. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Laura, love to hear from you right now.
Thank you, and thank you, the Sweetwater GOP, for hosting this debate. My name is Laura Tolliver Pearson. I am a wife, a mother, a grandmother, and I am a multi-generational sheep rancher, school bus driver, and small business owner in Southwest Wyoming. My awakening was the 2020 election and COVID. And the reason I'm running is for my children, my grandchildren, my God, my state, and my country. This election is critical in determining the direction in which our state will head. I wouldn't be in this race if I thought the future of our state was safe from a left-wing takeover. Please do your research. One of my opponents touts the relationships he has developed with state agencies, government and non-government organizations, and brags about all of his endorsements from these groups. In light of recent developments, do you trust your current representation? I am running for your endorsement, you, my employer. I am running because I want a relationship with you, the person who will put me there. I'm not going to pretend to know everything, as I am not a politician. But over the past 2 years, I have seen enough to know that the people's work isn't getting done in Cheyenne. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. And Bill, let's close with your 2-minute opening statement.
Well, good evening. It doesn't sound like it's coming out, is it? Okay. All right. Well, just checking. Thank you all for putting this on. Nice arena. Nice show. Well done. Along the way of my career, I was called to serve in the Washington, D.C. arena, and I didn't like what I saw. And so when the Navy decided I was too old, at the age of 52, by the way, but then that's a young man's game when you get down to it, I came back to Wyoming, and I decided I could get into the politics world and do something about it. I learned some things in those D.C. arena times. You can't win them all, but you can win more than your fair share if you speak well and you have a future vision of where you want to go. My wife Louise, 52 years out there, she's up there in the upper row. 3 boys. Yes, there is life after 3 boys. 5 grandchildren. One of my sons is a captain in the Wyoming Guard, and so proud of that young man. I'm running because I want to see some things happen. I want to see the safety and efficiency and success of the Kemmerer nuclear plant. I want to take on the property tax issue. I've spoken on that in committee and got a feature in a bill that would have addressed indexing for inflation. Unfortunately, the governor vetoed it. And so here I am asking for your vote August 20th.
Thank you, Bill. Let's jump right into it. A lot of great topics to cover this evening. And let me begin with Laura, the first topic covering carbon capture. With potentially billions of dollars worth of carbon capture projects coming into Sweetwater and its neighboring counties, how can the legislature ensure that Wyoming benefits from and appropriately manages this nascent industry?
Okay, so at the end of the day, there is no cost-benefit analysis. Our governor's carbon negative initiative is shutting down coal, oil, and natural gas. Why do we want to take plant food out of the air? Do we really want to be a disposal ground for other states? Why are we willing to be the dumping ground for any renewables? Are we really willing to pay increasing electricity rates to appease surrounding states that depend on our energy? We are destroying our landscapes and wildlife corridors for energy resources that are inefficient, destructive, and cost prohibitive. We need to get back to the natural resources that work and will help our country thrive. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. And the same question, we'll move right along to Bill. With potentially billions of dollars worth of carbon capture projects coming into Sweetwater and its neighboring counties, how can the legislature ensure that Wyoming benefits from and appropriately manages this nascent industry?
Well, I'm familiar with carbon capture. Having spent a career in the nuclear submarine world, we can seal those things up and operate for days to weeks to months. We use a monoethylamine process to pull CO2 out of the atmosphere so that we can continue to operate that way if need be. On the other hand, I'm a little bit skeptical about it because it's being driven by the federal level, and you know that's an inefficient process. And so this sounds like it. There we go. I would like to see the state get into the process and decide where it can be done efficiently and be done with it. You know, carbon's a big deal. We know from the geologic record that plants respond to it. So where do we go? Thank you.
Thank you, Bill. And Albert, the same question to you. I will repeat it if you'd like.
That's okay. You know, Exxon has been doing CCUS, carbon capture, utilization, and storage in southwest Wyoming for decades now at Chute Creek. And that CO2 has been used in other oil fields to promote oil, actually, to be able to get more oil out of the ground. And at the same time, it traps some of that CO2. I've been involved in the legislature in creating the regulation that sits behind carbon capture. There are some issues with it, in my opinion. I thought long and hard about whether carbon capture, whether the state should have to take over the liability for carbon capture. I became more comfortable with it after I talked to our chief regulator in Wyoming. And I think also we need to be aware that we may want to charge other states or other entities if they use our pore space. But we do have, we've created a good law around pore space, and I think we have the ability to be a leader in this. And our university that we've funded really well on this issue has become a leader in carbon capture and storage. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Let's move right along. And speaking of natural resources, and let me begin with Bill. Regarding water, what is your stance on ensuring equitable access to water resources within our district, and how do you plan to balance the needs of agricultural, industrial, and residential water users while also protecting our natural water resources and for future generations?
Well, we have to be a little bit careful with water resources. The Colorado Compact of the 1920s gives us an allotment that we really haven't fully utilized. In the 1920s, that was a much wetter time than today. So we got to be very careful. We also have to be careful about water rights. One of the things that I was asked by the Sublette County Republicans was to take an issue to the state convention about a person with prior water rights selling those water rights off so that people downstream didn't continue to get the water. We can't do that. We got to make sure we handle those kind of things right. So where do you divide between industry, agriculture, or just residential usage? Well, you got to make sure there's enough there for agriculture. I think that's a place you start, and then we go on to industry and residential usage.
Thank you. And let me pose the same question once again to Albert Sommers. What is your stance on ensuring equitable access to water resources within our district, and how do you balance the needs of agricultural, industrial, and residential water users while also protecting our natural water sources for future generations?
You know, thank you for that question. This is something that keeps me up at night. I'm really concerned about our declining hydrology on the Colorado River, the Green River in our case here, and I worry about how we will be able to cut up that pie. What I've done is I actually passed a bill that created the Wyoming Colorado River Advisory Committee, and so that brings all of the water users together, industrial, municipal, agricultural, and to have these conversations of how do we create mechanisms to ensure the viability of all of us, right? Because ag owns most of the water, and if you lose one neighbor that has a water right, maybe it doesn't make your ranch functional. So we're working on these issues, and part of the problem is the hydrology. If the hydrology dries too quickly, will we be able to get some of these solutions we're talking about implemented? So I think the bill I passed is a really good starting point for the conversations we'll need to have in the future. Thank you.
Very good. Thank you. Same question, Laura? And I will repeat it if you so choose.
Thank you. Wyoming needs to protect what is legally ours. Lower states need to be held accountable for the water allotted to them. They need to be exploring desalination and be looking into their own conservation efforts. Why do we always have to compromise? We need leadership that is willing to stand up for Wyoming and fight for our water rights, private property rights, and public property rights. Thank you.
Thank you. A lot of great questions once again, and we will begin our next series of questions with Albert. Covering broadband access. How would you expand broadband access in rural areas to ensure all residents have the connectivity they need for work, education, and health care?
Really appreciate that question as well. Broadband has become an essential service. Much like telephone used to be, broadband has kind of replaced that. But today, instead of having a single entity come in and run all of broadband, we have multiple companies, large and small, that weave this network. And so what the state's done, and it really started when in the endow under the last governor, I helped craft a bill that really set out the fact that Wyoming was going to have a broadband manager. It's housed within the Wyoming Business Council. And then the governor, we've also funded the governor to have a broadband policy advisor. And the reason we need those is because the federal government has brought in a lot of grant dollars for broadband, but it's to be implemented by the states, like $70 million, I think, in the first pot. We got that money out. The next pot is like 325 or 30 million. And so what we're going to do at the state level is really enable those grants to go out. And then once we get that done, we can see where the holes are in the system. Thank you.
Thank you, Albert. And continuing on, Laura, the same question. How would you expand broadband access in rural areas to ensure all residents have the connectivity they need for work, education, and health care?
Thank you. Why are Wyoming taxpayers having to spend their money on this? It is never going to solve the rural issue. This service will not help all citizens, yet all citizens are paying for it. Plus, it kills the capitalistic process our country was built on. There are plenty of companies that offer these services, and they work amazingly. Out at our place, we are out in the middle of nowhere, and we have Starlink, and it works amazingly. So for our legislature or our lawmakers to think that people don't have access, they very well do. Thank you.
Thank you. And finally, Bill, and I'll be happy to repeat the question if you'd like.
Go ahead.
All right, sir. Happy to do that. We figure 3 times around. Regarding broadband access, how would you expand the broadband access in rural areas to ensure all residents have the connectivity they need for work, education, and health care?
Some years ago, as I've been observing the legislature, I remarked to several legislators that one of the things we need to be doing was the state ought to make sure that fiber optic is getting run down every state highway in Wyoming. You know, if you look at how we do broadband worldwide, an awful lot of broadband goes through undersea cables, okay? Well, we're not doing undersea up here, but my point being, if those cables are there, people will get access, and the private business world will figure out how to get them connected into it. I'm not saying the state ought to pay to run those cables. I'm saying the state ought to incentivize getting those things done. One of the things that's good for this state is businesses that come into the state because they can run a business from the internet that's somewhere else. We have a $100 million outfit up in Sublette County that does environmental impact stuff for the Army and the Marine Corps. They came to Sublette County and Pinedale specifically because they could run the business, the CEO, from Pinedale because of the internet. We can do this.
Thank you, Bill. A lot of good coverage tonight, or I should say a lot of good topics covered. Let's transition to rural health care. We'll begin with Laura. And the question, do you support the expansion of telehealth services to improve access to mental health care in remote areas? If so, how would you facilitate the expansion?
Yes, I would support telehealth care. I know that a lot of people would welcome that idea of being able to call their doctors and get a prescription or get services that way. And as far as rural health care, everyone agrees that it would be nice to have a health care facility in every community. But my concern is, how do you staff these facilities? Are they self-sustainable? Who is responsible to pay for them? And will people actually use them, except in an emergency? We need to keep flight services available in Wyoming. I've been asked about maternity care. I think for maternity care, we should look at midwives and doulas for low-risk pregnancies to help. We need to get government regulations out of the way that are preventing choices. We live in Wyoming, and part of a choice in living here is the appreciation for our rural communities and wide open spaces. At the end of the day, people have a plan in these rural communities, and it should be them who decides what they want.
Very good. Again, continuing on with the topic of rural health care. Bill, do you support the expansion of telehealth services to improve access to mental health care in remote areas? If so, how would you facilitate the expansion?
Well, of course we support something like telehealth. That is how you multiply the ability of physicians and other medical staff into smaller and smaller communities. The real crux of your question, as I see it, has to do with mental health. I've heard the discussions from various people in the legislature over the years, and not everybody agrees that mental health is a medical issue. Well, I don't take that position. Mental health belongs to the doctors or the psychiatrists, if you will, or the other healthcare professionals, but the state needs to make sure that they have an equal footing, and if to the extent that that is also brought into telehealth, that's exactly what we need to be doing.
Very good, Bill. And I think you'll enjoy our next topic. But first, let me close this topic of rural health care with Albert. And again, sir, do you support the expansion of telehealth services to improve access to mental health care in remote areas? If so, how would you facilitate the expansion?
Yes, I support expansion of telehealth services. And it kind of goes back to the previous question, right? You got to have the broadband support behind those facilities in order for them to have telehealth. And I think mental health issues and mental health support is one of the greatest issues of our time. And I totally believe that government has a role in that. I supported the 988 hotline for suicide awareness. I've supported mental health grants for the K-12 system. But back to telehealth, I think it's critical that we create a network, and it's being created, a network of providers that can be put out into these rural areas, because it's really hard to get mental health providers in some of these very small communities. So this is a great idea, or it's being done, and I would certainly support more effort that way. Thank you.
All right, thank you. And the next topic, spending priorities, which I think maybe you both were starting to allude to. So let me begin with Bill. And regarding spending priorities, Bill, how do you prioritize state spending during periods of declining revenues? Are there specific programs or areas you would prioritize protecting? And conversely, which programs or services would you consider cutting or reducing funding for?
Well, if you stop and look at things, in any given budget, you have probably 60% of it that's fairly inflexible, 20% of it that is somewhat flexible, and 5 to 10% that is at issue. Well, where do you start? You start with essential services, law enforcement, EMS, other medical care. Then you come down to things like education, and you go on down. I would not necessarily cut something with a meat axe. You have to get into that 5 and 10% that I just talked about and start making sure that money is spent efficiently. I observed some years ago.
Conversely, which programs or services would you consider cutting or reducing funding for?
Thank you for the question. I actually served on the Appropriations Committee when we had one, if not the longest decline of revenue in the state's history. You know, I helped develop 5 budgets, counting the main budget and then the supplemental budget. And in those 5 budgets, I was part of cutting $900 million out of state government. $900 million general fund dollars, your tax dollars, out of state government. And so I know what those hard decisions are like, and how you prioritize is first your constitutional duties of the education, the courts, and corrections. Those are right at the top. And then you go down the line and you cut wherever you can. In fact, we cut everything. It didn't matter. We cut everything some. And then in good times, when we're in a good revenue situation, we want to reinvest in Wyoming some. It's just like I am on the ranch. When times are tough, I cut my budgets. When times are better, I try to reinvest in my ranch. Same thing at the state level. Thank you.
All right, very good. Thank you. And let me close that series of questions, Laura. And again, let me give you the question. How do you prioritize state spending during periods of declining revenues? Are there specific programs or areas you would prioritize protecting? And conversely, which programs or services would you consider cutting or reducing funding for?
Thank you. So, at the end of the day, spending priorities need to be the needs of the state, not the wants of the state. There's too much pork. Examples. Appropriations this year included $700,000 for a float, millions for an air show in Casper, a museum in Cheyenne. Pork projects don't serve all citizens of Wyoming, yet all of our hard-earned money is used to pay for them. During COVID, one of the first services to be cut was senior citizen meals. Are our seniors a need or a want? We need to start asking ourselves, is this something our taxpayers should be funding? They are hurting right now, literally living paycheck to paycheck, and we need to start giving back.
Thank you. We are really covering some ground, so thank you to all. and I think we've got time for a couple more topics before we're wrapping things up. Let's cover education, and let me begin with Albert. Education policy is crucial for our community's future. What are your top priorities for improving our education system if elected? How do you plan to address issues such as funding disparities, teacher retention, and ensuring equitable access to quality education across your district?
I really appreciate that question. I believe education is the single most important service that government provides the people. It is the great equalizer in society. I've been a huge supporter of K-12 funding. I think how we prioritize programs, I guess the one challenge I see in education funding, much of it is really determined by a bunch of Supreme Court decisions we've had. And how we fund education in the future will ultimately be decided in part by the Supreme or by the court case that's up right now. And so, but one thing that I see as a disparity in education funding is really the funding between large and small schools, large and small districts. And I just don't think there's the opportunity at the smaller districts and the smaller schools that there is at the larger districts. And I've worked on that for a long time. I haven't cracked that nut. But I think one thing in our small communities you have to realize is that the key, that school in those small communities is really the soul, the heart of the community. And so I think it's important that we invest in that.
Very good. Once again, the topic being education. Laura, I'm coming your way. And again, the question, education policy is crucial for our community's future. What are your top priorities for improving our education system if elected? And how do you plan to address issues such as funding disparities, teacher retention, and ensuring equitable access to quality education across your district?
Okay, so in my mind, parents need choices. In 2023, the ESA bill was killed. Then in 2024, my opponent brought back a watered-down welfare program bill, not an ESA bill for everyone. Plus, it made education choice accountable to state standards, which in my opinion is wrong. In our current education system, the No Child Left Behind and the social justice reform, etc., are leaving children behind en masse. Not to mention the policies that are federally funded and creating mental health issues. Some of these things, I believe, had good intentions, but somehow along the line were lost. All of this is at no fault of our teachers. Sorry to say, but our teachers didn't sign up for this, therefore resulting in a teacher shortage. They are sick of it, and so am I. Thank you.
Thank you. And let me pose that question finally to Bill. Education policy is crucial for our community's future. Bill, what are your top priorities for improving our education system if elected, and how do you plan to address issues such as funding disparities, teacher retention, and ensuring equitable access to quality education across the district?
I have observed the education committees for a number of years now. I have a close relationship with members of the committee. I observed my wife, Louise, I mentioned earlier. She's a career educator. During my active duty in the Navy, we moved 19 times in 30 years. I saw her teach in the good, the bad, and the ugly of administrations. This past legislative session, and speaking in front of the House Education Committee, as they were contemplating things like funding and teacher salaries and other things, I looked at the committee and I said, where is your heart? Is it in the business office or is it at the chalkboard? And my point being very simple, take care of the teachers, make sure they're paid well enough, and a lot of other things will fall into line. And that is where I will start.
Very good. Thank you, Bill. We've got time for at least one more topic to cover. Let me begin with Laura and parental rights. Laura, how do you plan to balance parental rights with the policies and curriculum decisions made by schools? Specifically, what steps would you take to ensure that parents have meaningful input in their children's education, particularly on sensitive topics such as curriculum content and school policies?
I think it would help a lot of parents if our school districts are more transparent as far as curriculums that are being offered. I am a firm believer in parental rights in education. I don't know how many times I heard this last 2 years that it isn't happening or it isn't a Wyoming problem, even though it very clearly was. In 2023, Chloe's Law was sent to the wrong committee by my opponent with a do not pass recommendation. It should have been sent to the Labor and Health Committee. I would be interested in seeing how many lawsuits our state has been involved in, since it is made pretty clear that school districts have unlimited funds to fight these lawsuits. I'm 100% in support of public education, but at the end of the day, teachers, parents, nor support staff have any say. There is no local control. We all need to be proactive, not reactive, and bring back the wonderful education of old where our teachers were free to teach, not teaching to a test. Our parents were involved, and we weren't relying on federal funding to dictate the progress of every student. That is local control. We don't co-parent with the government. Thank you.
Thank you. And again, the topic being parental rights. We're going to go to Bill next, the same question. Bill, how do you plan to balance parental rights with the policies and curriculum decisions made by schools? Specifically, what steps would you take to ensure that parents have meaningful input in their children's education, particularly on sensitive topics such as curriculum content and school policies?
Sometimes we confuse rights with authorities. It is important to recognize that the parents have the rights to what their children are being taught and how they're being taught and those kind of things. The administrators, the teachers, the other faculty in a school system exercise authorities that have been granted them either by the legislature or by the local school board. So the parents have the right to look into what's going on with their children in the school, and the administrators, the teachers, the faculty have to abide by the authorities that were granted them. It's important to make that distinction. Once you understand that distinction, the rest falls into line. The school board is the front line, the legislator is the backstop, and we need to make sure that the authorities granted these bodies are understood.
Thank you. And let me pose that question finally to Albert once again. How do you plan to balance parental rights with the policies and curriculum decisions made by schools? Specifically, what steps would you take to ensure that parents have meaningful input in their children's education, particularly on sensitive topics such as curriculum content and school policies?
So I have a proven track record of supporting parental rights. In fact, we grappled with these very issues this last session about trying that balance and figuring out how much rights the parents have, how much rights the school have. It's really not what rights the school have, it's what rights do the child have. And the questions boil down to, you want to make sure you're not hiding abuse, or turning over abusive parents, child to abusive parents. And we did that. We grappled with that. And in that process, we passed House Bill 92, which is protection of parental rights by Sweetwater County's own Representative Stiff. And we also passed Senate File 9, parental rights in education. And that was a committee bill where they really grappled with those issues. And parents should have all the rights they want. And I think they should have complete rights over their child, even at school. And I think the thing that we've done, the thing that schools are beginning to do, is put more and more of the curriculum online and make it much more accessible and transparent to the public and to the parents.
Very good. And I believe we've got enough time to cover one more topic. I'm not texting while I'm moderating. Actually, these additional questions I've got on my phone. So, Bill, I'm going to come your way, okay? Let me get this question. I apologize. And we talked about this during our previous debate regarding qualified immunity. The question is as follows. Qualified immunity has been a topic of significant debate, particularly concerning its impact on accountability and public trust in law enforcement. What is your stance on qualified immunity, and how do you propose balancing the need for police accountability with protecting officers from frivolous lawsuits?
We ask law enforcement to handle some really tough things and some people that can be really nasty. They have to make decisions, sometimes life and death decisions, in a heartbeat. I had the experience some years ago to go through the FBI Citizens Academy. It was up in Casper, and one of the things we did was we were brought into the simulator they have where you take law enforcement and you go through various scenarios. One of them was a guy that charged at me. I shot him, well, with one of those laser guns. As it turned out, I probably shouldn't have, given the scenario. So I learned something. But I also bring forth my experience as a commanding officer in the Navy, where you have to understand rules of engagement. And you have a lot of them. And you have to pick the right one, and you have to pick it in a microsecond. It is absolutely critical that we support law enforcement and recognize that they are tasked with making those kind of decisions in a heartbeat.
Thank you. Albert, the same question. Qualified immunity has been a topic of significant debate, particularly concerning the impact on accountability and public trust in law enforcement. What is your stance on qualified immunity, and how do you propose balancing the need for police accountability with protecting officers from frivolous lawsuits?
I support qualified immunity for civil servants, and I think our courts do a good job of sorting that issue out. We've even, had bills before us that talked about teachers that teach special education and making sure that they have qualified immunity for those really severe students. And so I'm fully supportive of qualified immunity, and I believe the courts will decide and rule on those instances where a police officer has done wrong.
Very good. And Laura, if you'll allow me to read the question. Qualified immunity has been a topic of significant debate, particularly concerning its impact on accountability and public trust in law enforcement. What is your stance on qualified immunity, and how do you propose balancing the need for police accountability with protecting officers from frivolous lawsuits?
I likewise support qualified immunity to a certain extent. I 100% back the blue and our officers. But I don't believe that there should be qualified immunity as far as abuse after the fact. And I know a lot of our officers wear the what are they? The cameras, so a lot of what they're doing is recorded, and I think that's good. But I'm just going to give you an example. Say an officer has a person on the ground handcuffed, and another officer comes up and starts kicking him. That should not be qualified immunity in my mind. So I think you have to look at this on a case-by-case basis, and let the courts handle it. But in that instance, I wouldn't be for qualified immunity. But I hope you see where I'm going here. But I do back the blue. I think that they should, have qualified immunity, but not in the instance of excessive abuse after the fact.
All right, fair enough. And that'll bring to a close this round of candidate debates. We'll begin our last segment with closing statements. And with 2 minutes, Bill, could we begin with you, sir?
How about that? Nice job up there. Maybe I projected my voice well enough anyway. But that said, I began observing our legislature years ago, and in 2009 I spoke up in a House Ag Committee. Alan Yagi down in Lyman had brought a bill about his vision of where he wanted Wyoming in a generation. He was asking for 50% funding. I got up. I had happened to be there, but I got up and spoke. And in essence, I said, you should fully fund this bill. And they did. That's when I realized that in Wyoming, you can affect what they do. I also have had the ability to provide vision for where things ought to go. Some years ago, I provided the initial thinking that fundamentally altered computer science education across the state, partly because I had a good relationship with the education committees. At the end of the day, I had the experience in my time in the Navy to write what amounted to regulation applicable within my 2 ships. And there were times when I wrote things and I looked back at what my crew did and I said, did I write that? Sometimes you got to go back to what you did. In this case, I'm talking about statute, and maybe change it because you didn't write what you thought you wrote. I bring that experience. I bring those kind of relationships that I've talked about, and I'm asking for your vote August 20th.
Bill Winney, thank you. And 2 minutes for a closing statement, Albert Sommers.
First of all, I'd like to once again thank the Sweetwater County Republican Party for putting this on. As a state representative for the last 12 years, I've worked to solve problems for my constituents, business owners, and communities. And really the most satisfaction you get is solving problems for your constituents when they have challenges with state agencies. And you can really impact people and lives and businesses in that manner. My endorsements from the Wyoming Contractors Association, the Wyoming Realtors, the Wyoming Mining Association, the Wyoming Stock Growers Association, the Wyoming Hospitality and Travel Association, the Petroleum Association of Wyoming, and the Wyoming Medical Society demonstrate the support I have from the business communities. These are the businesses that support the jobs, that support the families of Southwest Wyoming. I have the experience and I have built the relationships to be a successful senator for Southwest Wyoming. You can always call me at 307-360-7060 with questions or comments. Thank you.
Albert Sommers, thank you, sir. Laura, last word, 2 minutes.
Thank you. I'm asking for your vote on August 20th. My top priorities include property tax reform and relief, education issues, halting federal overreach, election integrity, the war on our legacy industries, oil, gas, coal, and agriculture, and in preventing foreign adversaries from owning Wyoming land. We need accountability, transparency, and elected officials who represent the voice of the people. Our constitutional republic needs us, and I need you to get engaged, do your research, and provide input. So that means, just like I have done the last 2 years, get involved in legislature. Listen to what's going on down there. If there is a bill that is close to your heart and that you are passionate about, get online and testify in those committees because it is your voice that is the most important. The future of our state and the freedoms we want to pass to our future generations rests in your hands. I have no doubt that we can fix this with good conservative leadership. Let's right the ship together. I would appreciate your vote on August 20th. And you can get a hold of me at 307-350-5640. Thank you.
Laura Tannenfaro Pearson, thank you. And gentlemen, also thank you so much for elevating the conversation here tonight. Ladies and gentlemen, once again, your candidates for Senate District 14. Now we'll do a quick turnaround and welcome our candidates for House District 17, J.T. Larson and Terry Ellison. And ladies and gentlemen, I believe we're about ready to move along. Our next candidate debate this evening covering House District 17. J.T. Larson is your incumbent. Terry Ellison is the challenger. Let's begin with a 2-minute opening statement and J.T. Larson.
Thank you so much. My name is J.T. Larson, your current representative for the Wyoming House of Representatives in District 17. Thank you to the Sweetwater County GOP, Broadway Theater, Johnny K, YO4 News, and all the volunteers who made this debate possible. I've had the pleasure of serving the citizens of House District 17 for the last 2 years, and I look forward to the opportunity to serve you for another term in August, or if you choose to select me on August 20th. During my time in the House, I've served on the Minerals, Business, and Economic Development Committee and the Travel, Recreation, and Wildlife Committee, both crucial to Rock Springs and Sweetwater County. I stood firmly against the Bureau of Land Management's Rock Springs Resource Management Plan. I dedicated many days, countless hours, and weekends to a task force that wrote comments to give Wyoming a legal stance against the federal government with this matter. Despite limited state legislature power, I supported funding measures for lawsuits, including a $75 million appropriation to stand up against the federal government. I also sponsored legislation allowing electronic vehicle registrations. This benefits companies with large fleets and streamlines the registration process, including a 30-day grace period for placing tags on vehicles while waiting for them in the mail. And I was proud to work with our county treasurer, Mark Cowan, on that specific issue. We have to be able to all work together when we're working in the legislature. Throughout this campaign, I've focused on why I'm the preferred candidate to serve in the House, and there's no room for dirty campaign tactics in Wyoming. And I look forward to the rest of tonight's debate. Thank you.
Thank you, J.T. And with an opening statement, Terry Ellison.
Good evening. I'm running for House District 17. I want to thank the Sweetwater GOP, YL4 News, and our moderator, Johnny K. I believe our community deserves strong, principled leadership committed to real solutions. I've lived and worked here for 37 years in Wyoming, and I've seen firsthand the challenges we face, from rising costs of living to the need for better job opportunities and enhanced public safety. Our district needs a representative who will stand up for our values, advocate for conservative principles, and work tirelessly to ensure our voices are heard at the Capitol. I'm committed to reducing taxes, supporting small and local businesses, and ensuring our schools provide the education that will equip our children with the knowledge and skills they need to excel in the ever-changing world. I'm running not for personal gain, but to serve the interest of our community and the citizens of Wyoming. Thank you.
Thank you, Terry. And I'm going to keep it right there. We're going to begin the questions with yourself. But before I do, if I could have you move that microphone a little closer. As Bill Lusmore used to say, we want to hear your bright, smiling voice. Fair enough? All right. God rest his soul. Let's start off with the topic of education. Terry, coming your way. How do you plan to address disparities in educational resources and opportunities among schools in different regions of Wyoming? And furthermore, what policies would you advocate to ensure all students receive a quality education?
Thank you for that question. Education in Wyoming is overseen by the Wyoming Department of Education, which sets the standards and provides resources for public K through 12. And the state has a mix of rural and urban districts with focus on ensuring educational access across diverse geographical areas. And I think that, with education, we need the fundamentals to go back to it, and instead of holding children back, let them go forward. And those that do need help, we can take and help. And that frees up the teachers to take and help the students that are having maybe a little bit of problem staying up with the classes. In the rural, I think that the rural do really good as far as education. With the smaller schools, they don't have as many problems with taking.
Talking about students that can't keep up, I thought he was talking directly to me. But, of course, I went to Lander Valley High. Again, the topic of education, we'll pose that to JT. How do you plan to address disparities in educational resources and opportunities among schools in different regions of the state? And what policies would you advocate to ensure all students receive a quality education?
Thank you so much for that question. In the last 2 years, I've advocated for education savings accounts, and this we did a pilot program so that way we can kind of see how it works across the state, and we're not jumping into something too quickly. We want to make sure we work all the kinks out and make sure that the students are getting a good education. One thing I'd like to note is our homeschoolers don't want money from the government because they don't want the strings attached. These are for people who can't have their students in public school for whatever reason, but they need the support to get funding for that education. I've also supported parental rights. 2024 Senate File 9, Parental Rights in Education. It requires school districts to notify parents and guardians of changes to educational, physical, mental, and emotional health of students. So I've worked hard on those things. I've also worked hard on making sure that all of the schools across our state have the resources they need to educate our students. And I've also advocated for a new high school here in Sweetwater County that will serve generations to come. And the reason why I supported that is because of the population growth projections are expected to exceed. So.
Very good. Thank you, JT. And anything in rebuttal, Terry?
I would just say that getting the new high school is a win. Sweetwater has been responsible for supplying a lot of revenue for supplying that goes to Cheyenne, and I think it's a good thing that that revenue is coming back, and the high school is one example for bringing some of that revenue back.
All right, Terry, I think it's a good thing you just teed up our next topic, which I'll begin with JT Larson talking about tax revenue. JT, given the potential for property tax reform to affect local revenue, what alternative sources of revenue would you consider to maintain fiscal stability for our local governments?
So, thank you so much for that question, Johnny. We have to really walk a fine line with alternative taxing. Nobody, including myself, wants to pay more taxes. One thing that I've worked on through my Minerals Committee work is developing a framework to attract new rare earth extractive industries. And attracting these new businesses will help with the revenue shortfalls that we're going to see across the state in the future, as well as if we decide that we want to lower the property tax burden, which I think we should on residential homes. So we're always seeking to find new industries that are willing to come to Wyoming, and I've worked hard to make sure that that happens in our state.
Very good. Same question once again. Given the potential for property tax reform to affect local revenue, what alternative sources of revenue would you consider to maintain fiscal stability for our local governments? Terry?
Well, we have several ways. We have mineral extraction, sales and use taxes, which is goods and services purchased within the state. We have the property taxes, and then we have investment income and federal aid and grants. But as a former coal miner, I know the substantial mineral wealth, particularly coal, oil, natural gas, and oil. I already said that. And Trona, revenue from severance taxes levied on these industries constitute a significant portion of the state's tax revenue. And that's what we need, is we need to get back to mining coal, drilling oil, and natural gas. And I'm not for carbon capture. I think it's a waste of money. I think it's a waste of taxpayers' money. And everywhere I've taken and looked, it's been a failed option. I think that maybe there is reasons for using carbon capture in taking in, like in oil, and we just it's a waste for taxpayers.
Very good. And 30-second in rebuttal if you choose, JT.
Thank you, Johnny. So I would say that the best way to support the coal and oil industry is to vote for Donald Trump in November to reduce federal overreach. Our current president is the reason why we are having so many challenges with the coal and oil and gas extraction in our state. We need to vote for Trump in November.
Thank you, JT. Let's move right along and change the topics to economic development. Terry, I'm coming your way. And, sir, what are your plans to promote economic growth and job creation in Wyoming, particularly in House District 17? Furthermore, how would you support local businesses while attracting new industries to the area?
Well, I think that the nuclear power plant in Kemmer is a good idea as far as bringing in the workers and then taking in, once the plan is completed, then you have it turned over to maintenance and you'll still have a workforce. I also believe that having the mine that's going to be opening over in the other side of Green River is also a good source of revenue for Green River, Rock Springs, and the surrounding area. That too will bring in many construction, and it will also leave people there to take work in the plant. This is also good revenue for our state and for the county. And I also approve of I lost my train of thought. Anyway, I'm just saying that we do have the opportunities, and I see it there. Thank you.
Very good. Same question once again regarding economic development, JT. What are your plans to promote economic growth and job creation in the state, particularly for House District 17? Furthermore, how would you support local businesses while attracting new industries to the area?
Thank you, Johnny. You know, economic development is really where I like to focus my efforts. I do it daily with my position at the Rock Springs Chamber of Commerce, and I also use my position in the state legislature to enhance economic development opportunities across the state. One thing that I'm proud to have said I've done in the last 2 years is Senator Jones and I started a community growth committee to kind of bring all the people together who are coming in with new industry and all of the people who can make decisions in our local community, and bring them together so we can have conversations about how we want our community to grow. Another way of supporting economic development is support for the Wyoming Business Council. I advocate strongly to fund the Business Council and believe that small businesses' success leads to thriving communities. And then also, economic development approach. We have to make sure we're focusing on making connections and building trust with people. And this ensures a seat at the table when companies are trying to come into our community. Thank you.
Thank you, JT. 30 seconds, Terry, if you so choose.
I was just going to say that also with the new expansion at the airport, that too will help our economy here.
Very good. Let me come back to JT as we change topics. Now on to higher education. JT, do you support continued or increased funding for the University of Wyoming School of Energy Resources, I should say? How do you believe such funding benefits Sweetwater County in terms of economic development, job creation, and advancing the energy sector?
Thank you so much for that question, Johnny. The School of Energy Resources, if you aren't familiar with it, is a fantastic school that we have within the University of Wyoming. And their mission is energy-driven economic development across Wyoming. And so their mission really guides how they teach students in their classes. And so one of the profound things that I've learned throughout my time in the legislature is they are working on a coal to product studies for various products that have not been proven yet to use coal in the process. And one of them is coal to asphalt. If we could generate our own asphalt here in the state, we could save millions upon millions of dollars on road construction across the state. And so that's why I support increased funding for the School of Energy Resources. But on other higher education topics, I support our community colleges. They are the ones that are able to nimbly adapt to the different industries that come into our communities. So I think it's a good thing for us to support higher education in Wyoming.
Very good, JT. Thank you. Continuing on with the topic of higher education, and Terry, do you support continued or increased funding for the University of Wyoming School of Energy Resources? And how do you believe that such funding benefits Sweetwater County in terms of economic development, job creation, and advancing the energy sector?
Well, I too support higher education, such as the university. We need the university to take and bring out people that are able to do like JT had just mentioned. but and I also support the junior colleges around the state, including Western College. But I think we need to also look at WildTech, who takes and equips students to fill jobs upon graduation. It takes and builds the economy, gives Wyoming youth other options, and allows them to fill jobs that supports Wyoming's industry sectors, mining, oil, and gas. And being a graduate from a tech school, I can attest to that it's well worth the investment for those schools to take and help the students to take and get the funds to continue their education, and so they can go out in the workforce. Not everybody, works in a desk, but we do need the people there for our industries here in Wyoming. Thank you.
Very good. Thank you. And 30 seconds, JT, and a follow-up.
Thank you, Johnny. Yeah, I just also wanted to add, I support the Wyoming Innovation Partnership dollars through the governor's office. These dollars have allowed Western Wyoming Community College to develop 2 new programs, one being the Power Lineman Program and the other being an upcoming nuclear program. These dollars have also supported our nursing program as well. So I think that we need to invest more in higher education in Wyoming so we can serve the industry better and therefore get more tax revenue through the state.
Very good. Thank you, JT. Let's move right along to the topic of local support. We'll begin with Terry Ellison. And the question, Terry, what specific initiatives or resources do you plan to bring back to our community? How do you envision leveraging your position to address the needs and aspirations of our area, whether in terms of infrastructure improvements, economic development, education, or other key areas?
Local support. I took and I looked at these. These are things that need to be in the community to be successful. We need law enforcement. We need firefighters, and I think we also need paramedics. But as far as the question, I really haven't got an answer for that. I'll pass it over to JT.
All right. JT, same question once again. What specific initiatives or resources do you plan to bring back to our community? How do you envision leveraging your position to address the needs and aspirations of our area, whether in terms of infrastructure improvements, economic development, education, or other key areas?
Thank you, Johnny. One of the things I was proud to work with Representative Wiley on was getting funding for our water treatment plant in Green River. This allows them to apply through the Water Development Commission to get a backup generator put in place for our water resources here in Sweetwater County. That way, if the power did go out, we would have backup power generation to pump water to your homes. So I was proud to support that. But I also supported other issues such as and I did an amendment to the local community funding bill, and I added $5 million. I supported additional amendments to increase the amount to local communities because we've already taxed those dollars at the state level. So if we give the dollars to the local communities, they can put those dollars to work without increasing taxes on the local communities. And another thing that's obvious and we've already talked about is I've advocated for the support of New Rock Springs High School, and we were able to bring that home with the work together on with the delegation. So.
Very good, JT. Terry, anything in closing? 30 seconds.
Thank you.
All right, very good. Let's move along now, try to squeeze in as many topics and questions as we can. JT, with our next topic, I want to come your way. Covering workforce housing. JT, how do you plan to address the shortage of workforce housing in our area? What specific initiatives or policies do you believe are most effective in ensuring that our community has affordable housing options for essential workers and middle-income families?
Thank you, Johnny. And I think we have to be really careful on this subject. We're not talking about affordable or government housing. That's not anything that I would support. But I do support lowering the interest rate, which is set by the feds. It's high regulation. If we lower the interest rate within the state of Wyoming, we are deregulating the feds. So I think if we can lower the interest rates, buy down the interest rate in the state of Wyoming, this attracts people to purchase homes rather than rent property. So I'm very opposed to having another man camp in our community. I think that we need to make sure that we have the resources available, the infrastructure in place, so that way housing developments can be developed when projects come into our community. And another way I've been working on this is, again, through the Community Growth Committee that Senator Jones and I started, and we're just making sure we're having all those conversations so we can be prepared for the growth of our community.
Very good. Terry, same question for yourself, sir, regarding workforce housing. How do you plan to address the shortage of workforce housing in our area? What specific initiatives or policies do you believe are most effective in ensuring that all the communities have affordable housing options for both essential workers and middle-income families?
Well, if I understand the question right, we are supposed to take and have affordable housing, like build state housing in state lands, like in Wamsutter for the YDOT plow drivers, or like South Pass for the plow drivers. It's a complicated issue, and when I get to Cheyenne, I'm going to do my best to understand all of it. I know Wyoming supplies housing to state employees, and I know that with the industry that's coming or is already here, we're going to have an influx of people, and I think that's a question that we have to answer now, sooner than later. And we are going to have a problem. So it's going to be all of us. It's going to take all of us to figure this out. And once I get to Cheyenne, I'll work on that. Thank you.
Very good. Thank you. 30 seconds, JT, and a rebuttal.
Thank you, Johnny. I just don't know why the voters would choose someone who doesn't even know anything about the subject when I've already worked on this, and I'm continuing to work on it.
Very good. And I believe this is our final topic, at least for this series of debates. And let me begin with Terry, the topic being mental health. Terry, what community-based mental health programs would you support or propose to address the specific needs of Sweetwater County? Also, would you advocate for increased state funding to support mental health services across the state?
Wyoming Behavioral Health Division, managing and funding programs, support the health, treatment, prevention, and education. I think that mental health is a big problem, not only in Wyoming, but all over. And I think it's the way we handle it. There's two facilities here in Wyoming. There's one in Evanston, the state hospital, and then there's one in Casper. And that's about it as far as facilities. We have the hospital here that handles the mental health. For 72 hours, you're taken in. The county is overseeing it. And then after that, it's the state, and if they have insurance, then the insurance covers that. But I think that we should look at
and I apologize, Terry, I believe you're out of time. Let me get the same question to JT regarding mental health. And again, the topic, what community-based mental health programs would you support or propose to address the specific needs of Sweetwater County? Further, would you advocate for increased state funding or support mental health services in the state?
Thank you, Johnny. Prior to the budget session, the Sweetwater County delegation sent out a survey to the constituents of Rock Springs, Green River, and we asked, where do you fall on the support of suicide prevention funding? 80% of Republicans fell in support of funding suicide prevention. That is why I supported the 988 Suicide Prevention Hotline funding, and I will continue to support that as long as the data shows that it works. We have to have data-based decisions when we are dealing with these things. I'm not afraid to say if something's not working, we can try something else. And to talk about the facilities across the state, we do have 2 facilities. I think it's time for Wyoming to look at doing a centralized new facility to deal with mental health problems. Our hospitals around the state are overloaded, and they have very limited resources as far as rooms for patients who are suicidal. And so we need to have a larger facility somewhere in the state that can address the problems that we see.
Very good. Terry, how about if I give you 30 more seconds? Rebuttal on that topic?
Well, we do have a higher than average suicide rate. So we do need programs for suicide prevention training, as JT said, the hotline, and community outreach, and support for individuals affected by suicide. Thank you.
Thank you. And JT, I believe you're going to raise a point of order.
I just would like to say that the responsibility does not necessarily fall 100% on the state to deal with this issue. We need churches to come together, community support groups, support with the Southwest Counseling and Sweetwater County Prevention Coalition. It takes everybody. It takes you as an individual to know when somebody's suicidal to get them help. So we all have to work on that better, and I think that I think we're moving in the right direction as a state.
I'm sorry? Just so we're clear, I think somebody had asked how that became your question. That was a point of order as Terry Ellison used your name in his response. So that's why it was a 30-second additional rebuttal. And since I've got your attention, JT, if you would begin with 2 minutes and your closing argument, or I'm sorry, your closing statements.
Well, thank you again so much to everybody who has come out to become more educated on who's running for office. I do really appreciate that, and I appreciate my opponent being here to discuss these issues tonight. My opponent and his supporters, I'd just like to raise a few issues. My opponent and his supporters have made various bold claims regarding the way I conducted myself as a representative. First off, there was a lie told that I voted to take Trump off the ballot. I support Trump 100% and would have opposed any effort in Wyoming to take him off the ballot. We need Donald Trump to be president to get our country back on track. Next, my opponent has claimed that he would have taken various different actions than I did while serving in the legislature. I'll take a moment to go over those with you. I think the biggest one is he would have voted against the budget, therefore opposing funding for border security, property tax relief, a new Rock Springs High School, and he would fail his constitutional obligation to fund education in Wyoming. My opponent is misleading you when he says I voted against parental rights in education. In 2024, I supported Representative Stiss' bill, Protection of Parental Rights, and I supported the Education Committee's Parental Rights bill in education. So I would just like to close out and say I look forward to further discussions as we go over the next few weeks, and I would appreciate your vote on August 20th. Thank you.
Thank you, JT. We began with yourself and opening statements. So, Terry Ellison, I'd like to give you the last word in 2 minutes.
Thank you to everyone who has participated in this debate and to all who have watched online. In conclusion, I want to reiterate why I'm the best choice for House District 17. Our community faces many challenges, but I believe in our potential and the strength of our values. I am committed to advocating for lower taxes, supporting small and local businesses and industries, ensuring our children receive the quality education they deserve. My experience as a coal mine electrician family man has given me the insight and determination needed to tackle these issues effectively. I believe in a government that serves the people, not the other way around. That means fighting for policies that promote economic growth, protect our rights, and uphold our shared values. I will bring a fresh perspective and unwavering commitment to every decision I make, always keeping the best interest of the House of District 17 and the citizens of Wyoming at heart. Your support is crucial, and I promise to work tirelessly to build a brighter future for House District 17 in Wyoming. I also would like to thank all the people that have supported me so far and that are backing me. And if you have any questions, I'll be happy to visit afterward. Thank you.
Terry Ellison, J.T. Larson, again, your candidates for Wyoming House District 17. Thank you so much. And one more discussion to have, ladies and gentlemen, and we're surprisingly running well on schedule, Bruce. Thank you. Our candidates for House District 18 will welcome to the stage your incumbent Scott Heiner and Tom Crank. All right, ladies and gentlemen, let's continue. And our final discussion of the evening will focus on House District 18, your incumbent Scott Heiner, and the challenger Tom Crank. As we have observed throughout this evening and will continue tomorrow evening as well, we'll begin with the incumbent and a 2-minute opening statement from Scott Heiner.
Thank you, Johnny K. Appreciate this opportunity, and for all those behind the scenes that made it happen, I appreciate their efforts to bring the information to the people, because people really want to know what's going on with our state and our federal government. I am Scott Heiner. I grew up in Wyoming. I've spent the past 35 years here in southwest Wyoming in the oil and gas business. I've since retired, and I've spent 4 years in the legislature. Many times, most fairy tales start with once upon a time. During campaign season, a lot of these fairy tales start, if I'm elected, I will do this or do that. So that's why I want to talk about some of the things I have done in the past 4 years to support the communities and constituents here in southwest Wyoming. When there was a nuclear plant proposed for somewhere in Wyoming, they ran a survey in Kemmer, and over 80% of the people said that they would like to have that nuclear plant in Kemmer because the Naughton power plant was being closed down, and they were worried about over 200 people losing their jobs. I lobbied for the nuclear plant for Kemmer. I went and had lunch with one of the vice presidents of Rocky Mountain Power. I wrote letters of support, and I did everything that I could to bring that to the southwest Wyoming area. In McKinnon, I worked to keep the Forest Service from raising right-of-way fees by over 6,000%. Their right-of-way fees for ditches and irrigational structures on the forest went from $240 a year up to over $10,000 a year. I met with the regional supervisor for the forest, and we got that put on hold so that it wouldn't encumber our ranchers. I represent the people not only in Cheyenne, but also here in southwest Wyoming.
Thank you, Scott. And with a 2-minute opening statement, Tom Crank.
Thank you. And first I would like to thank everybody for the opportunity to introduce myself. I'm, again, Tom Crank. I'm looking to become the representative for House District 18. Can you hear me all right? I am running to become the representative for House District 18. It has been my honor to have previously represented House District 18 from 2017 to 2020. My experience includes 30 years as a business owner in Kimmer, 42 years as a private engineer and land surveyor practicing in Kimmer. 6 years I served on as the Lincoln County representative on the Upper Green River Basin Joint Powers Water Board, and the last 3.5 years I've served on the Lincoln County Planning and Zoning Board. In my professional role, I have worked for nearly all local communities in southwest Wyoming, along with several of our large industrial plants and mine. I have been active in the community for over 40 years and have always been open to meeting people and learning new things. I remain a supporter of economic development and the jobs and opportunities it brings to our citizens, particularly our kids getting out of school and entering the workforce. Southwest Wyoming and House District 18 in particular are now positioned for the largest economic development in decades. Some of the larger projects started or getting underway include TerraPower's Natrium plant at Kimmer, ExxonMobil's carbon capture, Project West Trona Mine and Mill, and Pacific Soda's Dry Creek Trona development. These projects look to inject $13 billion in construction in the next 5 to 6 years, and we'll see a dramatic change in the area and its ability to provide services to our people. Following the construction, the permanent workforce to operate these facilities will provide all communities in the area with opportunities to grow. I am a straightforward problem solver and a traditional responsible Republican.
Apologize a little over the time limit, but as we start our first topic, the questions coming your way, and Tom, I believe it's going to follow on where you were going. The topic being industrial siting. Tom, currently industrial siting impacts funds are indirectly collected through sales taxes. Do you support a shift to a system where developers pay these funds directly? Why or why not?
I think I would support a shift for the developers to pay these directly. However, the current system, as I understand it, is really set up to help industry and local governments achieve a better outcome for the development that might be taking place. A lot of our smaller communities, especially with these big projects, have no way to gauge what kind of services they may need and what they might cost. And the mechanism to fund these, I don't think, is as big as the issue as just making sure everybody knows what the socio-economic impacts might be, and getting everybody on the same playing field and paying their fair share. It's a benefit to both industry and the communities to have this work smoothly.
Very good. And again, the topic, industrial siting. The question again, currently industrial siting impact funds are indirectly collected through sales taxes. Do you support a shift to a system where developers pay those funds directly? Why or why not, Scott?
Johnny K., the Industrial Siting Act was passed in 1976 largely because of what happened here in Rock Springs with the construction of the Jim Bridger power plant. It created a burden on the local communities. And so this was a way to be able to bring some relief to the local communities that are stressed under these large industrial projects. But Wyoming is the only state in the union that actually pays for those damages caused by the industry. Other states, if the industry comes in and causes damages, then the industry pays for it. Wyoming uses our sales tax. Now, let me give you an example. Microsoft is building a data center over in Cheyenne, $900 million. That is by Bill Gates, one of the richest men in the world, that has 5 times more money than the state of Wyoming, than the entire state of Wyoming. The state of Wyoming will pay for those mitigation to fix the roads and increase help for the local communities, probably $50 million, tens of millions of dollars, the state of Wyoming. So it's going to cost, it's going to come out of our tax revenue. But by the way, they are tax exempt, sales tax exempt. So Microsoft is not paying any sales tax. So we as taxpayers will end up paying about $100 a piece to Microsoft to mitigate.
All right. And a 30-second rebuttal, Tom?
Yeah, you know, they're paying the tax. We all pay the tax. But when these big industries come into a community, and I'll have to be remiss, I don't know the status of Microsoft paying taxes or not. But say some of these plants and industries, they pay huge, not huge, but they pay sales tax on every piece of equipment they bring into the community. So they are, in a sense, paying part of the impact that they incur to the communities.
Very good. Let's continue on the same road. And Scott, let me pose a question to you. How do you think changing the method of collecting industrial siting impact funds from sales taxes to direct payments from developers would affect Wyoming's economy and local communities, and even the investors' decision to develop in Wyoming at all?
In my role before I retired, I got to build some large facilities throughout the United States. I actually helped design the Exxon Shoe Creek plant way back in the 80s. But in other states, when we went into those areas to build a large complex, we would give some donations to the communities for the impact. And we would make a big play in the media about that. We'd have a great big check with so many zeros on that check saying, we want to be a part of your community, and here we're bringing some dollars to help with some of the mitigation. It is a great opportunity for these businesses to be a part of the community as they bring those large industrial complexes. Now, just going back to what my opponent said here, Microsoft is exempt from sales tax. Data centers do not pay sales tax. So there is no sales tax collected off of these data centers.
Thank you, Scott. And let me pose that same question to Tom. Tom, how do you think changing the method of collecting industrial siting impact funds from sales taxes to direct payments from developers would affect Wyoming's economy and local communities, and even the investors' decision whether or not to develop in Wyoming at all?
Well, I think if you change the policy and they know ahead of time, it's something they can budget into the process. You know, I don't know that it makes that much difference, but the part that my opponent had about they bring the big check out and make a statement in the paper. To give you an example, when Exxon was built, they came to Kimmer and they did a good job, and they didn't have a siting council then, if I remember right, and they basically paid for their recreation center in Kimmer. Now for the last 30 plus years, the Kimmer Foundation has to subsidize the city of Kimmer to the tune of about $45,000 a year just to help maintain the facility. So yeah, those things help, but we have to look at the bigger, broader picture in the future and what is the maintenance cost for those two. So I don't know that that answers your question, but it gives you a little idea of my thought process on some of that.
Very good. Thank you, Tom. Rebuttal, Scott, 30 seconds. Fair enough. Let's move on to the next topic regarding local support. And let me begin with Tom. Tom, what specific actions would you take as a legislator to ensure that Sweetwater County receives its fair share of state resources and funding?
So local support, I guess I kind of look at this as I'll take local support for 400, sir, and try to answer the question a little bit like that. It's kind of jeopardy here. The big thing I see with local support, you know, you have senior citizen centers that are trying to get funded. That's a big pull right now. Workforce training, child care, and family services. The method of getting more of that funding, I think, just comes from your legislative body and your people you have there to get out and advocate for your position on those. I don't know that I have a specific change in what you'd do there, but I think you need to have good legislators looking to advocate for your position.
Very good. Scott, let me give you the question again. What specific actions would you take as a legislator to ensure that Sweetwater County receives its fair share of state resources and funding?
Johnny K., let me answer that with an example of what I actually tried to do. The Green River is trying to build a wastewater treatment plant, a new one, and with high inflation rates, they're underwater and struggling to be able to pay for that. So this last session, during COVID, we got hundreds of millions of dollars from the federal government, and we haven't been able to spend all that money. So right now we've got over $50 million that have not been spent. So we had a bill to gather that money back and reallocate it, and I tried to change that such that the money would go for infrastructure. And the way I had the bill written, it would specifically benefit Green River to help them finish the wastewater treatment plant. I could not get support and help from the Sweetwater delegation to do that. It ended up that money's going to mental health issues now instead of for local support, as what I intended to do.
Very good. Tom, I'll give you 30 seconds in rebuttal if you choose.
No, thank you. I think you presented it well.
Very good. Then let's move on to our third topic, workforce development. Scott, I'm coming your way with a question. What initiatives would you support to improve workforce training and development to meet the needs of local industries?
Johnny, we have had this issue of workforce development for decades, how to respond to changing workforce needs, and that's through our community colleges. I have been proud to work with our community college. When I was a manager of the oil and gas business in this area, we stood up an oil field maintenance program. My company, or the company that I worked for, donated a lot of the equipment. We put people on their board to help them design the curriculum. As those demographics change, they have stood up additional programs. The power line program, they're standing up the nuclear program now. That is how we develop our workforce, is by anticipating those and working with the community college hand in hand with them, business and education, to come up with a program to help our workforce development. And I applaud our community college. They're nimble, they're robust, and they have responded when we've needed them.
Very good. And the same question, Tom, what initiatives would you support to improve workforce training and development to meet the needs of local industries?
Well, I think Scott put it very well. I don't want to reiterate everything he said. And I would go to say that while I've been out canvassing, there have been considerable discussions on workforce development and the community college in Western Wyoming, Community College in particular, and everybody seems to agree that they've done an excellent job in helping out Southwest Wyoming, and not so much maybe the University of Wyoming. There's been some stuff there. So more funding towards the community colleges. And as a little background, Western Wyoming College, I think, is poised as well as anybody to probably pick up more four-year degrees and help develop more workforce in Southwest Wyoming and help push Southwest Wyoming forward.
Very good. And Scott, anything in rebuttal? Very good. Let's move on to our next series of questions regarding transportation infrastructure. Tom, I'd like to begin with you. What are your plans to improve transportation infrastructure in the state to support economic growth, community connectivity, and general welfare and safety?
So let me say a little bit about transportation infrastructure. It has always cost too much, but what does it do for us? Infrastructure, transportation infrastructure, built the railroad that built Wyoming, that built the interstate highway system that connects the whole country, and now airline service, particularly to Southwest Wyoming, is benefited by good continuous air service. I think we need to keep pushing for more services available at the Southwest Wyoming Regional Airport, and we also need to help out local communities, particularly counties and cities, to develop master plans on how connection between the cities and the county should go. I think the State Department of Transportation has a pretty good handle already on its side of that equation, but counties and city government could always use more help there.
Very good. And the same questions, Scott. What are your plans to improve transportation infrastructure in Wyoming to support economic growth, community connectivity, and general welfare and safety?
So when I was going to college, I worked for the Wyoming Highway Department during the summers to pay for my college. They actually got me an engineering degree through that summer work program. So I'm familiar with our transportation department to that extent, but it's been decades ago. It used to be when you traveled from Utah, or from Wyoming to Utah, you had really good roads in Wyoming, and once you crossed into Utah, they went really south fast. Now that's flipped, and and we've seen this just west of town here, where they have built a new interstate or repaved and then had to redo it the next year. What's going wrong there? What happened to change that? Well, a number of years ago, they took the highway department off of the budget and made a standalone organization that they don't answer to the legislature anymore for budget. They've taken the power of the purse away. And periodically, over the past decades, they have been removing various organizations, Game and Fish, WYDOT, some of these trust funds that we're seeing. That's so that we don't see how fast our state budget is actually growing. It's growing double digits every year. But by pulling some of those things off and putting them in a trust fund, we don't see how fast it's growing. But we lose the power of the purse.
Very good. Tom, anything in rebuttal?
You know, I think the only thing in rebuttal is, yeah, I think you do see some issues with the highways in Wyoming, particularly I-80 and particularly on this side of the state where it doesn't seem like the surface lasts as long as it should be. And from an engineering standpoint, I think that probably has to do with what materials are available here. And a big part of highway construction has to do with cost, and the cost is to haul those heavy materials to place. So I think it's a little of what Scott said and a little of the other.
Scott, anything in closing? Very good. Let's move right along, covering some good ground here this evening. Next topic, I'm going to begin with you, sir, and community colleges. Scott, how do you propose to ensure that our community colleges remain at the cutting edge of education and workforce training? Also, what specific measures would you support to guarantee that they are properly funded and able to meet the evolving needs of students and the local community?
I think one of the reasons I'm a big fan of our community colleges is because it's right here locally. They live right here amongst us, and they realize what needs to be done. They listen to us. We have local control. We have a board that members live right here. And so I am a strong advocate of our community colleges, as I've explained before. They continue to work with us. We don't have the traditional students like we used to have. A lot of these students, they're working during the daytime and they go to a night class or two, trying to further their education and get a leg up. So I think we need to continue to support our community colleges. When I was in business, we worked very closely with our community college. We were there every month for operational meetings and safety meetings, and they were helping train our people. Let's continue to do that. Let's let industry work with community colleges, because we have a fantastic community college here in Rock Springs.
Very good. Let me pose the same question to Tom Crank. Tom, how do you propose to ensure that our community colleges remain at the cutting edge of education and workforce training? Also, what specific measures would you support to guarantee that they are properly funded and able to meet the evolving needs of students and the local economy?
So if I remember right, community college funding is partially through the state and partially through the county in which the college is located through, I believe it's a mill levy or whatnot. Western Wyoming Community College is a great benefit to all of southwest Wyoming, and I don't know that on my property taxes in Lincoln County I contribute much to it. So a district-wide deal would probably be a better issue, I think. So, and then as far as what they do for industry, yeah, I'm right behind Scott on. They've done a great job. We want to keep them nimble, and they've done a great service to our communities just being here. I'd like to see him move forward.
Very good. Scott?
I'd like to add to that. I think that's a great point that Tom has brought up. We have outreach community centers up in Afton, in Kemmer, Evanston, and they are not paying that mill levy to help support that. So that's a disparity. We are supporting those outreaches from here without help from those areas where they're actually in the small community. So that's a problem with the way we're doing it right now that needs to be addressed.
Very good. And a couple more topics to cover this evening. Tom, I'm going to begin with you as we talk about mental health. What is your plan to improve crisis intervention services for individuals that are experiencing acute mental health crises located across the state?
So, to be honest, mental health is really outside of my realm of knowledge or my wheelhouse. But I have had friends that I've known that have had mental health crises, even some to go as far as suicide. It is surely a disease that needs handled and taken care of, and I believe more funding should probably go to that. To the extent of how much to go, I'm really not aware. I know that the Department of Health is one of the big, I don't want to say drain, but the big hitter in part of the state's spend, and we need to keep looking at mental health. It's a real disease, and not just, as I said, suicide, but all other kinds of schizophrenia and whatnot. And the broadband interconnectivity to help people get diagnosed and whatnot has got to be something that helps.
Very good. Again, the topic, mental health. And Scott, coming your way, what is your plan to improve crises intervention services for individuals experiencing acute mental health crises locally and across the state?
So mental health is a big problem, not only in Wyoming, but other states are seeing this issue as well. And we often hear we only want to see Wyoming solutions for Wyoming problems. Well, we would be remiss not to look at other states and what they're doing and what they're having success with. Mental health, I think it goes to some of this gender ideology that we're experiencing with our young people. And other states have had huge success by putting chaplains and clergy back in schools. Let's give them some people that really care about their mental health issues. We've heard that some legislators don't support the suicide hotline. That's a false narrative. I don't think there's a single legislator that does not support the suicide hotline. What some of us don't support is taking it off the budget and making it a standalone trust fund that we have no control over, taking away that power of the purse. The suicide hotline is invaluable and has had some success. But many people don't realize that our high suicide rates are not necessarily with youth, it's with people my age. Older men are the highest number of suicides we're having in the state of Wyoming. It's a broad situation. We need a broad approach. And right now we're paying about $300.
Thank you, Scott. Tom, I'll give you 30 seconds in a rebuttal if you like.
The only thing I'd say there is I think the clergy and whatnot, we have church services and whatnot that they can stay to where they're at. I don't know that we need to introduce that into the public school system. Straight off, I'm a firm believer in separation of church and state, and I believe that clergy and whatnot do a tremendous job in helping those people. We just need them to get those people to them quicker, and they'll do a good job for us.
Very good. And that brings us to our final question of the evening. I'm sorry? Yes, please.
Johnny K. There's been 3 or 4 states that have introduced clergy back into the schools, and in those states, their suicide rates were driven to 0. 0 is a pretty small number, but it had a dramatic effect. Do we want to look at other states and what's successful over there, or bury our heads in the sand and say we only want Wyoming solutions for Wyoming problems?
All right, thank you. Final question. Property taxes and essential services. Scott, will begin with you. And the question is as follows. If the proposed 50% cut to residential property taxes were implemented, how would you propose that local governments in Wyoming fund the essential services they provide, such as public safety, education, and infrastructure maintenance? Also, what alternative revenue sources or budget adjustments would you suggest to compensate for the reduced property tax income?
Johnny K., there is a false narrative going around that if we reduce property taxes, when you call 911, the fire department or the EMS will not show up. That is totally false. The state of Wyoming is standing behind those property tax relief. The bill that the governor vetoed, which was the best one that we put on his desk. We put a ton of things on his desk, but that was the best bill we put on his desk this past session. It would have given 25% property tax relief to everybody in the state. We appropriated $220 million to backstop any loss to the local communities. So if the local municipalities, counties, towns, because of that 25% reduction in property taxes, the state would backfill that money. It wouldn't come out of the county. They would be kept whole. So that's a false narrative. We need to look at those legislators that refused to call for a special session to overrule the veto, because they really don't want property tax relief. Those are the ones are the problems. They love to have your money. We put $2 billion into savings. We can afford to give $200 million back to the people.
And final question, Tom, again, if the proposed 50% cut to residential property taxes were implemented, how would you propose that local governments in the state fund the essential services that they provide, such as public safety, education, infrastructure maintenance, and etc.? Also, what alternative revenue sources or budget adjustments would you suggest to compensate for the reduced property tax income?
So the statement's been made that we just backfill that money from the state, which is, I guess, fine this year, maybe next year. But what about the year after that and the year after that? The 250 becomes 500, becomes 750, becomes a couple million. So that stuff has to come from somewhere at some time. So the property tax, I'm all in favor of property tax reduction. The 50%, I'd have to go through and see just to what extent we were going to cut. And I think it would be kind of devastating to some essential services at some point in time. So we'd have to look into that further and make sure where we're going. As going through the campaign season, I've kind of popped off as a candidate as, yeah, I'm all for the 4% or the one that's looking to come a constitutional amendment. And why does government think it's entitled to additional sales tax or property tax just because my neighbor sold his house for more? I thought about it a little bit, and I thought, well, how would you do that? And maybe you would tie it to inflation. But I think where they're setting that now at 4% in that amendment, we'd have to watch and see, because inflation may be higher than that at some point in time. So I just think you have to think about it quite a while and get all the pros and cons before some guy like me just pops off what he'd do in the legislature.
Very good. Scott, I'll give you 30 seconds.
Thank you, Johnny K. We have individuals and families that are struggling to pay their bills. Some families can't even go out for fast food anymore because the prices are so high. In the meantime, the state put $2 billion, that's with a B, $2 billion into savings. We've got $30 billion in savings right now as a state. How much is enough? It's time to give some of that money back to the citizens that are struggling to be able to pay for food. Let's give it back.
Very good. Thank you, Scott. And we're going to leave it right there as far as the questions are concerned, and also with yourself. You began with your opening statement, and I'd like for you right now to close with your 2-minute closing statement.
The word conservative apparently means different things depending on whether it's an election year or not. I have a hard time understanding how someone that supports higher taxes, greater government spending, and increased government regulations in Cheyenne can come home and tell everybody that they are conservative. And if they don't want to say that they're conservative, they say that they're for economic development. The Wyoming Business Council, we heard about that just in one of the other debates. Wyoming Business Council is charged with developing our economy. I just saw the annual report from the Wyoming Business Council. They created or brought 40 jobs into the state of Wyoming at a cost of $49 million. To generate 40 jobs for $49 million, is that a good return of investment for our public money? In the meantime, over here in Black Butte, mine, we've lost that many jobs. Rather than trying to find these jobs, let's protect what we have. We need to protect the jobs we have, and that's through our natural resources. I have been an advocate for our coal-fired power plants. I've been an advocate for oil and gas, for all of our natural resources that we've lived so abundantly over the years. I've enjoyed a great life here in Wyoming. I want it to continue for future generations, and that is why I serve. I like to stand up for the little guy. I've always cheered for the underdog. That's why I like to represent the people here in Wyoming. I don't work for the government. I work for the people, and I'm reliably conservative in Cheyenne and here at home, and I appreciate your continued support.
Scott Heiner, thank you. We let you open this debate, so Tom Crank, 2 minutes, please, and your closing remarks.
Again, I'm Tom Crank, and I'm asking your support to become the Wyoming House District 18 representative. I'm a lifelong Wyoming resident, and everything in Wyoming has been tied to natural resources. My family's been in the coal industry for as long as I can remember. If you go to Heiner, Wyoming, you'll see a name carved on a stone from an accident in the early 1900s in Heiner. So I believe in our extractive industries and what they've done for Wyoming. Those industries have built this state and paid for it. So I support the natural resources, ranching, tourism, and all that stuff that keeps us moving forward. I'm a straightforward problem solver and not a political zealot looking to fight off the big bad government. My theme for tonight is centered around economic development. Tonight's topics are related in that industrial siting is necessary to make sure that socio-economic questions get asked and applied evenly. Industrial siting is intended as a cooperative effort between industry and government. Workforce development with our critical industries is important as well as Western Wyoming Community College role there. Together we can manage these issues if we keep in mind that state and local government is present to help its citizens realize their potential by minimal regulation and keeping the playing field level for all. Our people will have real issues that need discussed and resolved out in the open, and I will look at each piece of legislation with the same question. What does this do for the citizens of House District 18, and will it help improve their lives for the better? I remain hungry to serve House District 18, and I would appreciate your vote on August 20th. Thank you.
Thank you, Tom. It's Tom Crank and Scott Heiner, your candidates for Wyoming House District 18. Gentlemen, thank you so much, and ladies and gentlemen, thank you for joining us tonight.